Welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live streaming interview series, where leading new thought teachers, speakers, and authors share the intimate stories behind the 10 best spiritual books that inspired them the most on their spiritual journey. From well-known classics to hidden gems you might never have heard of, the No BS Spiritual Book Club saves you time and money by sharing reliable recommendations from those who've walked the path before you. The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only No BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello and welcome. Joining me today to share the 10 spiritual books that had the most influence on her life journey is artist, author, teacher, wildlife photographer, and cat servant, Ann Gadd. Ann Gadd is a holistic therapist, a journalist, artist, and the author of 35 fiction and non-fiction books on art, creativity, healing, self-help, and the Enneagram, a personality typing tool that categorizes us into 9 different types based on our core motivations and fears. An accredited Enneagram Practitioner, Ann's books on this subject include the Enneagram of Eating, Sex and the Enneagram, and Better Parenting with the Enneagram, 9 types of children and 9 types of parents. Ann Gadd, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
So you've said that for as long as you can remember, you were either writing a book or reading one. I mean, with 35 books in your back pocket, I would think that you've spent an awful lot of time writing over the years.
Yeah, even as a kid, I used to write like stories and some form of creativity, whether it was reading or writing or constructing something, or I gained deep pleasure from doing things like that. I really enjoyed it. And I think I went for many years only reading non-fiction, and probably until I was in my 40s. And then I joined a book club, and I realized that the lights of fiction and what I've been missing all these years, and that I'd become almost too cerebral in my reading approach. And so I was very grateful because that opened me up to a whole new world of reading. So I read a lot. Yeah.
Go on, admit it. You've described yourself as an addict.
Completely, absolutely. Up until recently, I belonged to 2 different book clubs because I had different types of books. So yeah, no, a complete addict, and across all different types of writing as well. I find that interesting as well. I don't just like to stick to one genre. But I suppose in my own writing, I haven't stuck to one genre either. So I guess that figures.
Yeah, so much to say, so little time. So you said that you thought it would be an easy task to do this list, but in fact, it proved anything but. Tell us about that.
I have, in fact, the room where I paint, there's this huge wall, and it is full of books, despite the fact that almost on a weekly basis, I take books in to give to the charities when I'm finished with them, or friends or whoever. But so standing sort of confronted by this huge wall was very difficult because I had to take myself back in time and what was going on in my life at that particular time. And I came back to my office with this whole pile of books and then discarded half of them and then went back. And, it was like that because, I mean, how do you really define those just 10? I mean, when you went with the OMI Awards and you were reading out the most popular authors and books, I mean, I think apart from 2, every single one of those books I had read. And I was thinking at the time, I should have included, why didn't, So I think, but I believe that, is this true? Yes, I think it is. Essentially, all these books are trying to tell us the same thing in different ways.
Yes.
And so it's just how you hear it and what resonates with you at that particular time. I mean, if you never had that, well, I'm sure you have had that experience. You read a book 10 years later than you've initially read it, and it's like a new book. There are all these different things you never picked up on, because at the time you were in a different space.
Yeah.
So
you couldn't hear it. Do you remember
No.
the first spiritual book that you read? The first one that really kind of got your attention, shifted your perceptions?
No, I can't. I think it was a book on yoga, but I'm really it was it was. I can't remember a specific book other than being a workshop junkie. So you were going to all these different workshops, buying the book of the person who was giving the workshop. But yes, but I think if we're talking a book that has stood out as being one of the first books I've ever read, was a little book called Space, Time and Beyond. Let me hold it
That's
there.
the first book on your list that we're going to talk about, yes. Space, Time and Beyond, Toward an Explanation of the Unexplainable, by Bob Tobin and Fred Alan Wolfe, published in 1975. Is that when you read it, or more recently?
No, that's when I read it. I was in London at the time working there, and there was this lovely little bookshop right near where all the theatres were. And I found this book there, and it appealed to me because as an artist, I'm very visual. And if you just, everything is sort of illustrated. So these deep concepts are illustrated, and then there's a brief explanation. And I think it was a book where science and spirituality meet, where profound things like when you contemplate or think about something, you have the potential to change that thing. Well, that is a very sort of contemporary thought pattern, but it actually has its roots in science. And there was so much that in that simple little book. It's a kind of book that you can pick up and think about, ponder one thing while you're on the loo, and it sometimes the simplest things or the most complex ideas, that there's a real skill in simplifying them. I remember the days of reading, and no offense to Alice Bailey, but plodding my way through vast volumes of her work, But it was so refreshing to read this book where so many concepts were drawn. And so yes, it made an impression on me. And it helped to link what I had believed, that basically science and spirituality were saying the same thing.
Yeah. Well, book number 2 is one that's very popular on the book club, and that is Anatomy of the Spirit, The 7 Stages of Power and Healing by Caroline Myss, published in 1996.
Ta-da! Also from 1996. So I had a lot of influence from people like Louise Hay, Rosalind Briere. I went to listen to her talk. Fascinating stuff. So sort of almost taking the mind-body connection and expanding on it. And when I heard that Carolyn was going to be in South Africa, I then leapt on an aeroplane with money I didn't have and went to Johannesburg and hired a car and did all these brave things, which were brave for me at the time, and went and listened to her, and absolutely was enchanted. Loved the way she taught, and to this day, I was listening to her talk the other day on narcissism. She's working with archetypes. So really, an incredible teacher. And in this book, it looks at the chakras, but it also combines Hindu teachings, but with the Tree of Life, the Kabbalah. So it sort of brings together all these different religions, if you like, or forms of spirituality, I prefer to say that, and overlays them over each other, and to give us a profound insight into the nature of ourselves and how we are energetically constructed.
Yeah, she's yes, so many people just love this book, and with good reason. So number 3, Eastern Body, Western Mind, Psychology and the Chakra System as a Path to the Self by Ann Gadd Judith, published in 1966.
So I was thrilled actually to go on to your website and see that she was part of this book club. It felt an enormous honor to be, I won't say standing side by side, but on the same sort of page, because this book really did influence me, and in fact to the point that I introduced in a lot of the work I was doing at the time, this understanding of the chakras, and it inspired me to write Climbing the Beanstalk, which is a book about how all the main fairy tales mirror the 7 growth stages of the chakras. So that, yeah, it was a fantastic reference book for that, as was Caroline's book. And obviously then, yeah, 1 or 2 of the other books we're going to go into later were also very influential.
I like the comment you made about this. You said some books are meant to be read and reread, and such is the depth of wisdom they contain. This book, this particular one, is one that you have read many times.
You know, I don't normally underline things in books because I don't like damaging the books. Going through this one, I see so much of what I underlined at the time, which is, it almost shows me how dedicated I was to the book at the time, and still now, because I'm reading what I underlined 30 years ago, and its relevance has not faded. There is still so much wisdom in this book and so much to be learned from it. It's not a light read. I mean, you don't sort of pick it up like a James Hadley Chase and flip through it in the night, but there's a huge amount of wisdom in that book.
Yes, there is. Book 4, Man and His Symbols, conceived and edited by Carl Jung. And this book actually owes its existence to one of Jung's own dreams. Apparently, he dreamed his work was understood by a wide public rather than just by psychiatrists. And therefore, he agreed to write and edit this particular book. So, very prophetic there. This one came out in 1964. So tell me how it impacted you.
I believe it was the last book that he wrote before he died. So it really embodies so much of the man's wisdom and his understanding of symbols, and how, what did they say in the Talmud? If we don't work with our dreams, it's like having a letter that we leave unopened. Yeah. And, I went to a Jungian analyst, in fact 2, thinking about it. And both of them, in unpacking your dreams, you just realize, wow, how these things that so many of us just sort of either forget or don't give any attention to, really is an incredible form of self-healing, because it's your subconscious and superconscious really communicating with you in a symbolic way. And what I like about Jung, there are many things. If you go onto the internet and type in dream symbols, what does it mean if I dreamt of a black cat or something, they'll give you the answer. And I think his is so much more open and so much more based in different belief systems and rituals and things of the past. It's not so specific, which I don't believe dream interpretation should be, because different things mean different things to different people. If I go back to the cat, I mean, I absolutely adore them, but if you don't like them because they give you hay fever, my dreaming of a cat and your dreaming of a cat is going to be very different symbolically.
Yeah.
And I believe that much of what we read on the internet or in books as well is too specific. And different things mean different things to different people. And I believe this book was a wonderful grounding in understanding that in art. I mean, there's so much symbology in art. Everything we look around us. I mean, our days are in fact symbols. I mean, if you take your day and you imagine that you had dreamt your day, you could learn a lot about yourself from that experience.
You say that you have, for years in your paintings, used African symbols.
Yes.
Was that before you read this book or after you read
No,
this
that
book?
was considerably long after. It's because I believe that symbols can carry a lot of energy with them. And the intention is to imbue the hanging space with the positive energy as symbolized by the symbols.
And do you choose the symbols or do they choose you?
The symbols are African in origin. So I just sit down and I put on the paintings whatever symbols. I mean, I know the symbols and I know them well. So whatever ones happen to come into my head. That being said, there are also symbols there that I've conceived that have just sort of come about. I don't know. They just appear on the canvas, you know. And I had an American commission, and they wanted me to use, Native American Indian symbols in the painting. And that was very interesting because I learned a whole lot of new symbols that I'd never encountered before.
Interesting. Book number 5, another one that frequently gets mentioned and probably is towards the top of our most recommended books, most often recommended, The Power of Now, A Guide to Spiritual Enlightenment by Eckhart Tolle, published in 1997.
That's the year a friend of mine had a birthday. And so she invited some of her girlfriends to this. She'd hired this beautiful house next to the sea, and we all went there. We were going to have fun. I grabbed this book on the way out the front door, and that was me gone for the weekend, which wasn't the most sociable behavior. And I did apologize afterwards. But I was just so, here was a man who was talking about presence and talking about the need to get out of our minds. And it was captivating. I went on to read some of his other books afterwards, which I enjoyed equally as much. But this was the sort of forerunner of thinking of what is presence? What does it really mean? People talk about it, but what does it really mean? And have I experienced it, And if so, how? And I think we're going to go to the Enneagrams later, but, one of the things about the Enneagram is the essential need to work with head, heart, and body. And I think this book is saying to an extent that, if we're totally living in our heads, then we cannot achieve this presence that we're seeking. Because living in your head is fear.
It's interesting because you said that, you're at this party this weekend, you've got your head stuck in a book. You were in the now as you were reading that book and discovering its power. And yet, at the same time, we often think that if we're thinking, and reading sometimes can be like thinking because we're digesting those words and analysing what they mean to us. One would think that you would be anything but present if your attention is on understanding the words. But there's something about that book that really just bypasses thinking.
That's very comforting the way you put it, because that really was the experience. And then you become one of these, like what's it? Is it Plato's cave? With the I think it is Plato's cave, where the guy goes and he sees the reality of nature in this cave. That the people walking across a bridge are in fact only shadows thrown by a fire of what is real. And he runs out to tell the world, and then he gets killed because people don't want to hear the truth, as have so many what is the word? Prophets, ended up being killed. But
Yeah.
And so I think I remember taking this book and saying to people, "You've just got to read this book," and not getting as enthusiastic a response as I was hoping for. And then you just realize, what, this is not really. It's an individual journey, and when the time is right, we pick up the right book. And I do believe that.
Yeah.
You can't force people to read a book or try and persuade them. I mean, because then I think you would read the book and you wouldn't get anything from it.
Exactly. You've got, the book knows when it's the right time, and I think we know when it's the right time too.
I remember years ago, I owned a health shop, and just outside the health shop, someone left this gorgeous book called Bridges. And to this day, I never know who left it or why or what have you, but it was the book that I needed at that time. And I think that's what books do. They kind of show up unexpectedly in our lives. And
Yes, I agree with that. Book number 6, very intriguing title. After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. How the Heart Grows Wise on the Spiritual Path by Jack Kornfield. Published in 2000.
That's the cover. I love humor. A lot of my art in the past has to do with humor, and I've written a number of books that involve humor. And I just love that title because it's so very real. And I believe that what we do sometimes is we sort of turn people into gurus and then get deeply disappointed when, like pretty much all gurus, they don't behave the way we want them to. There's either sexual issues or money issues or drug issues or whatever. And then we feel terribly let down. And I think the message of this book is, if you find the guru outside yourself, you haven't found him. If you find the truth outside yourself, you haven't found, And so he tells, the whole thing is really sort of snippets of stories of his interaction, because he was with, and I can never pronounce him, and various other spiritual leaders. So he says himself, he got a sort of close-up view of these people that many of us have revered, and saw how incredibly human they were. The Zen master, he's got children yelling and screaming at him for being a useless parent, and how can you're a Zen master? Why aren't you a better father? Kind of thing. And I love the book because it shows our essential humanness.
Yeah.
That we might have this incredible experience, and he describes this journey on a train after there's been this incredible breakthrough consciousness awakening, and now he's on 2 in London, and everything is the same, but nothing is. And it's that absolute normalcy of returning to, to life. I mean, we sort of mystics without monasteries. And for that and the humor and the very realness of it, none of us can put ourselves on pedestals and say, I am the enlightened one, because to do so is essentially to fall off that pedestal very quickly. So for that reason,
I love the comment that your friend wrote in the book. Tell us about that.
I'll have to read it. I've got 2 copies of the book. Basically, and just correct me if I'm wrong, I think she said, I'm halfway through the book or something, but I need to go and do the laundry, so I'll read the rest later. Is that right? Is that what? Yeah.
I think you'd read halfway, then had to do the laundry.
That's right. No, I've got the hard copy and I've got the paperback here. But yes, it's a very realness of wanting to live a higher vibrational life when you do have to cook supper and collect the kids from school and sort out fighting colleagues, whatever it is. This book was very comforting from that point of view.
Yeah, life still goes on, doesn't it? We're going to take a short break now, Anne. You're listening to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's 10 Best Spiritual Books weekly interview series and sharing the 10 books that influenced her life journey the most is artist, author, teacher, wildlife photographer, certified Enneagram teacher and cat servant, and we'll learn a little bit more about that later, Ann Gadd. We'll be back with more from Ann Gadd after this break.
OMTimes TV.
Maya Angelou once said that there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and when I'm not hosting OMTimes Media's flagship radio show What Is Going On and the No BS Spiritual Book Club, I help people share their untold stories. Books are my life, my joy and my passion, and there is no greater reward than helping aspiring writers get their books out of their heads and into the hands of those who are waiting to read them. If you feel that you have a book in you but don't know where to begin, visit sedgbeer.com. Click on the Work With Me tab and find out how my experience helping others tell their stories might be just what you've been looking for. That's sedgbeer.com, sedgbeer.com.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. OMTimes Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, OMTimes offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an OMTimes magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on OMTimes TV and broadcasting it across the extensive OMTimes radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. OMTimes. Open yourself to the possibilities.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Ann Gadd, book number 7 on your list is Women Who Run with the Wolves by Jungian analyst Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and that was published in 1992.
Yeah, there we go. This book describes the wild feminine aspect of ourselves that has, through the years, been suppressed, destroyed, whatever. And so Estes uses fairy tales, myths, legends, and so on to describe this aspect of ourselves that has gone missing. And I love that. And in fact, I did several paintings based on the the concept of discovering the wild woman inside you.
You say that you especially liked some of the delicious names of the tales. sea skin, soul skin, and the dirty goddess. I mean, you know, if they don't make you want to read those tales, I don't know what would. But you say they help us find our way back to our true selves.
Yes, they describe in a mythical way how we've lost that essential power. How, I mean, I think we've just, in The Power of Now, he talks about the women, it's easier for women to reach enlightenment than men, which I think is quite a controversial statement. But it's because of that essential Mother Earth, Mother Nature, the universe is seen as a feminine aspect. So in these stories, it's how do we get that back? How do we move away from the 1950s sort of woman who really had lost all sense of herself, all sense of her instinctual power? And in Sealskin, Soulskin, the woman who is essentially a seal, but a beautiful woman, gets lured into a fisherman's boat, a lonely fisherman's boat, and he takes her back to land and says, I will keep your sealskin for 7 years, and then you can make a choice whether you want to go back or not. Well, of course, when it comes for her to go back, he hides the sealskin. He doesn't want her to go back. So essentially, there's an aspect, I think, of masculinity that doesn't necessarily want women to find that more empowered state of themselves.
Well, I think it's very true that all of us edit ourselves. We edit ourselves all the time, depending on the company we're in, just to fit and not make waves. And I think it's especially true of women, because it seems, that there's certain characteristics that are not okay for women to express.
If a woman in the workplace, and look, a lot of this has changed, but back in the days when I was in the corporate world, if a woman asserted herself, she was classified as a bitch.
Yeah.
If a man asserted himself, he was classified as a strong leader. There was that kind of prejudice.
Yes.
That was certainly there, back in the day.
Stereotyping. I haven't read that book. It's been on my list for so long that I really need to get around to reading it. So book number 8, Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear by Elizabeth Gilbert. And this was published relatively recently in 2015. You say this one was a revelation for you.
I loved it because it unpacked what it is to be creative. Okay, and creative doesn't mean something that you hang up on your wall. I say that, like, we started with the canvas, and the canvas is essentially us. But what we do on the canvas is how we live our lives, how we choose to be creative. So anything that makes you feel alive and awake and connected is essentially creative, whether that be gardening or cooking or sculpturing or just taking a walk along the beachfront. They're all aspects of creativity where we move away from that horrible little word that says you shouldn't, or you should be doing this. And what I liked about her is that she peels away many of the myths of creativity, these fears that we have, what if I just do a one-off wonder? What if I don't even do a one-off wonder? What if I'm too old to start creating? What if I'm too young to start creating? And she also looked at the fact that creativity is tough. It's a tough job. You need courage and you need persistence. And there are going to be those days when you wake up thinking, oh, I just don't feel like this, or I'm not in the zone, or whatever it is. And she's saying, no, that's when you actually carry on working. That's when you do the stuff. Because I think so much creative talent is lost to those voices. Oh, I'm just not in the mood today. And I feel, in fact, that her book is incredibly inspiring. My husband is an artist. and he reads a book once a year just to keep himself on track so that he doesn't forget and get stuck creatively in those messages, which basically are all based on fear.
Well, the point is that we all need to learn is we're creating all the time. It's
Absolutely.
just sometimes we're doing it, unconsciously, and we can do something consciously too.
Absolutely. And how you approach that.
Yeah.
So it's a fantastic book. I really she's writing specifically about authors, but it encompasses all forms of creativity. And anyone who's sort of done the artist way and now looking for motivation, this book doesn't let you slack off. This book inspires you to create despite the negative voices in your head.
Now, as an Enneagram practitioner, of course, there are books on the Enneagram in your list, and book 9 is The Spiritual Dimension of the Enneagram, 9 Faces of the Soul by Sandra Maitre, published in 2000.
So a lot of what we see on social media these days is sort of pop psychology, Enneagram stuff, 9 ways we go shopping, or that kind of thing. And it's fun, and I'm not knocking it, but it misses the depth of the Enneagram. And really what this book is doing is it's like a deep guide to where we have lost our holy truths. So if you look at what we call the divine, God, Jehovah, whatever, as having many names, so many aspects, those aspects overlay, or those holy truths overlay over different Enneagram types. And it's the very opposite of the fixation that drives our personality, our ego-driven personality. So it's really the coming home, the landing ground of where we are headed once we can let go of those fixations.
Do you think that this book is a good book to give to somebody who is fairly new, to the just waking up and want to begin to learn more about themselves? Or would you say that it's more for somebody who is a little bit more seasoned in the spiritual arena?
Facing ourselves, as you, and I'm sure all the listeners know, is never easy. And I believe if you jump up in front of people and expose them too early in their journey, they run a mile. Because who wants to face those aspects of yourself, those shadow aspects that maybe aren't so pleasant? Who wants to face the stinginess in one, or the need to be right, or one's own gluttony, all those things? So I believe one has to tread very carefully when giving people books, because you may do the opposite of what is intended. And I would say in this instance, that is probably so. That being said, how do we know? How do we know that we're not going to give this book to somebody who's living on the street and it's just the very thing that turned their life around? We don't know that. But it is a more complex book than some of the other books that are out there. So it's a read. But there's so much wisdom and so much self-understanding, and it's a relief. It's like, oh, so now I get it. Now I understand why these things have been happening my whole life, and I haven't got. I couldn't understand why. Now I get it. Somebody's tapping me on the shoulder, saying, "Wake up, darling," And then I went back to sleep.
Yeah. Well, you say that it shows how the Enneagram not only reveals our personalities, but illuminates a basic essence within each of us. And isn't that really something that most of us are journeying to find, that basic essence within us.
Yes.
Mm.
You know, where have I fallen? Where have I moved away through fear from the essence of who it is I am, and created these behaviors and fixations and you know, things my neuroses have created in order to protect the ego that essentially is doing the very opposite of myself, my higher soul self, not, you know.
Yes. Yeah. Well, book number 10 is The Wisdom of the Enneagram, the complete guide to psychological and spiritual growth for the 9 personality types, written by Don Richard Riso and Russ Hudson, published in 1999. And you say this is a classic that most students will encounter on their Enneagram journey.
Absolutely. It's very all-encompassing. It's very informative. It's written in such a way that it's easy to understand. You know, they've written a number of other books, but this remains, I believe, the classic sort of intro to the Enneagram, and yeah, all it encompasses. So it's a great reference book. I still go back and reference stuff from it. Yeah, it's if you intrigued about the Enneagrams, it's a very good book to start on.
So that's your 10 books. Now, if you could have dinner with any one of those authors, or have the opportunity to sit face to face with them in conversation, who would you choose?
Okay, no, I think probably maybe Carolyn Mace. Simply because I like her. She's a very warm person. So probably her, or Eckhart Tolle, just because I would be fascinated, but probably quite intimidated in a way, whereas I think I'd be, you know, I'd be more relaxed with Caroline.
Yeah, well, she's a lady who doesn't pull any punches. You know, you're going to get what you're going to get from her.
I do know that, and I do know when she came here, there were people who were upset because of the fact that she did just that.
Yes.
But I witnessed it, and I witnessed them handing over their permission to her.
Yeah.
So there are always two sides of the story.
Yes,
You know.
Exactly.
And
So what first interested you in the Enneagram?
my brother gave me this book. In fact, it was The Wisdom of the Enneagrams, and I mistyped myself, because we always do, because we think we know ourselves, but in fact we don't. So, and then I said, no, just another personality profiling system, not interested. Here's a book back, cheers. And so I really dismissed the book, and all the wisdom it contained, because I didn't understand it, and I didn't understand myself sufficiently to land into who I was, or am, in fact. And it was only a good couple of years later I saw this, you know, I just have to see the word book sale and I'm there. It's like, you know, bees to honey. And there was this other book on the Enneagrams that combined the Enneagram, strangely enough, and yoga. And I picked it up and I read the personality 5. And it was my husband completely. I mean, what he said, what he did, his man cave. I mean, it was like somebody had come into our home and described what this man. And then I thought, well, if it's so accurate with him, maybe I haven't got myself. And that started the journey of, you know, who am I really? Because clearly who I thought I was, aspects of it are there, sure, but it wasn't the totality of who I was or am.
Did you find after you got involved with the Enneagram and learned more about your type, did it change the way you work in any way? I mean, you're a very creative person. Your output is fairly prolific. Did you find that it gave you permission to do something that you hadn't done before? Maybe because of the fear?
I believe that because of the type I am, we are desperately afraid of not belonging or being part of. So the effect that had on me was not to really want to become known or have to do talks like this, because then you're putting yourself in the firing line. And so when I wrote Sex in the Enneagram, it was a very, very tough thing for me to put it out there, because I knew the minute you have the word sex in anything, people are going to be ready with their boulders to hurl them at you with great force. And sure enough, the first review I got was, "Don't ever read this book." So, which was mortifying for me, because, I'd got other Enneagram people to go through the book, and, I'm not being too offensive, but it's the nature of the Enneagram, the aspects of ourselves when we're healthy, emotionally, and when we're not so healthy. And you don't do anyone a service by only talking about the great parts of ourselves. What we're doing is feeding their egos, and you're not really giving anything to work with. So, yeah, and I think I don't want to be, say, hiding your light under a bushel, but there was that sort of fear of what would happen if I became more than just a woman working in a little back office somewhere, writing endless books, doing endless paintings, yeah. But there are also things, things like putting your head in the sand. I mean, I'm brilliant at that, sort of avoiding fashion issues. So the awareness of that, then you start thinking, oh, I'm doing it again. You become your own conscious observer. And then you can make the choice if you want to remain like that or you want to change that behavior.
You described yourself in your keywords, and we always ask people to give us a couple of fun keywords that only perhaps their loved ones, would use to describe them. And, without doubt, you're a self-confessed cat servant, by which I guess the rulers in your house are the kitties. Tell us, could you apply the Enneagram to the cats?
Oh, yes. Oh, definitely. I have 1/8 who is, he's a small cat, but he walks around like he's, I'm in charge here. No, nothing happens without my saying it happens. No, it's completely, and I got an animal whisperer in because I got a rescue dog, and there were some problems and I needed to find out what the background of the dog was. And I mean, this cat turns around and he says, "I am suave. The other cat is not suave. I am extremely suave." And yeah, I mean, just they definitely have different personalities. And yes, just like anything else, like countries or anything really, you can apply the principles of the Enneagram too. So yes, they are. I have a definite 2 dog, the rescue one, and these 2 cats. So yeah, the 8th cat who really does believe they run the show.
So would you not? Would you choose not to have a pet if you got a glimpse of certain types?
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
No.
Because once again, this rescue dog, her owner died, and she had been put into the SPCA, and coming obviously from quite a very loving background. She had quite a horrific time, sort of locked up in a cage and so on. And when she came, she was really, really in a bad way. She couldn't stop panting. She was nervous energy. She was really quite, and I remember thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to get around this dog? And really with love and routine and so on, she's completely changed dog. So if I applied what you said to her originally and hadn't got her, I would have missed out on a really fantastic dog and a very loving dog.
Yeah. So tell me about your art, because you're a very prolific artist and you've written, as you said, all kinds of different types of books. You write for children. where's your inspiration come from?
I do have an Enneagram book on cat personalities, if you're interested. It's called 9 Lives, and it examines your personality of your cat. So I had great fun writing that. I loved it because you could play the court jester. You could say things in that book that you wouldn't really be able to say if you were talking about people. But because you're talking about cats, it's perfectly acceptable. So I had a lot of fun with that, and I did the drawings, illustrations myself, so I also enjoyed that. But getting back to the art, years ago, my husband lost his company. Things were really bad. I had been working myself to the bone, trying to do alternative therapies, trying to bring up 2 kids, teach art classes, teach Reiki. I mean, just this whole mishmash of things just to try to keep our heads afloat. And then it got to be winter, and the art classes tailed off, and because no one wants to do anything in winter. And everything, the income stream just sort of dwindled. We sell most of our work to tourists, and there are no tourists in winter. And I was in the garage where we used to paint, and I just said, I don't know what to do. I'm absolutely broken. We're going to lose the house. The kids are going to have to get out of this nice school. What do I do? And it was like this voice said, paint sheep. And I'm like, no, I need more than that here. No, that's not going to do it for me. And this voice just said, paint sheep. And then you reach that stage of absolute, you know what, thy will, not my will. I'll paint sheep. So I grabbed a couple of canvases and broke rebelliously every rule in the art book. So my hills go out of the painting. My sheep are absolute bang center, all the things that we were taught at art school you shouldn't do. And they had funny little sayings like meditating sheep, or creative accounting sheep, or the CEO was balancing on a ladder about to fall off, because that's what CEOs feel like. And I took them to a gallery, and I took 7, and they phoned me on the Monday. It was a Thursday, and they said, bring more sheep. And that started an incredible journey of 5,500 paintings of these little funny sheep, doing with plays on words, French sheep, that kind of thing. For which I'm grateful, because we put the kids through school. We kept our house. It literally was like in that moment of surrender to the ludicrousness of sheep. I mean, come on. Something magically born.
Sounds like a comic strip to me.
Well, not really, because they're only sort of single incidents of things. But, because of that, there was a sheep cookbook, and, you at work, and, things like that. So whine a bit and you will feel better. So there was a series of books that was done relating to these sheep, which were a lot of fun, taken from the paintings.
So, what else do you paint? I mean, is it all humorous?
No. Since then, I do wildlife stuff using the symbols. In fact, I've just done a painting today that's going on auction for the Wildlife Rhino Foundation. So I do that, and sell those. But also, I've been going a lot more personal and a lot more into my own symbols and my own subconscious, and bringing stuff out from there, which is a very much more perhaps feminine approach to art. So that's been quite an interesting journey, because the thing is that the other paintings, I kind of know where I'm going when I start off, but these new works, I have no idea where I'm going. And I have no idea what the end result's going to look like. And it's more like a case of allowing stuff to come up and taking the fear of what's it going to look like? Will it sell? Absolutely having to take that away and just going with it. And some days it feels like it works amazingly, and other days it doesn't feel like it's working at all. And being okay with that, you know?
Yeah. What gives you the greatest pleasure? Is it writing or painting?
I'm sorry to say, but up until the last 6 months, I probably would have said depending on the day either, because some days I write, some days I paint. But I have to say in the last 6 months, it's been heading off into the bush and being with animals and taking photographs of animals. And it's just something that's opened up for me. And I just love it. The wilder, the better. The more remote, the better. You know, the dirt roads. You know, we nearly rode over 2 lions this last trip. They were lying under the tree in the road, and you know, we didn't see them, and then suddenly there was this lion like staring right at me. But it's those experiences. I mean, watching a wildcat hunt birds, and yeah, just watching the elephants at the waterhole and how they play and the fun they have, and being privileged enough to have a camera in my hand to be able to capture that.
Yeah.
So that's really where, at the moment, I'm landing. But I'm busy on 3 books, so we'll see where that goes. But yeah, at the moment, give me a lion and a camera.
Ann Gadd, thank you so much for adding your 10 best list to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, OMTimes for my award, and really appreciate it. And go read.
You deserve it. That book was for Ann's The Enneagram on Parenting. Very well deserved. So for more information about Ann Gadd's art, books, workshops for beginners and advanced students, visit her website at anngadd.co.z, or Z if you're in America, A. anngadd.co.za. And you can learn more about the Enneagram at enneagrams9paths.com. That's it for this.
Sorry, and no E on the N.
Yes, absolutely. ANNGADD. Yeah. So that's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. I'll be back at the same time next week with another 10 best interview for the No BS Spiritual Book Club. Till then, it's goodbye from me. And thank you again to Ann Gadd.
Thank you.